Good evening, I'm Stephen Cummings, and welcome again to yet another edition of the Citizens Community Forum, where we discuss issues relative to the national community. Sometimes we take a regional perspective as well as an international perspective, all depending on what's happening as these events affect our very humanity here in Trinidad and Tobago, and of course the wider world. Again, I'm Stephen Cummings. Welcome to another edition of the Citizens Community Forum. Our objective is always to have an engaging and interactive session, and sometimes, our discussion can be emotionally charged. At times, we cover a wide range of social and community issues. And of course, our guests and/or callers are persons who express views and opinions of their own, and sometimes may not necessarily be that of the FBN Network, the Citizens Community Forum, or that of the host. As I said before, our topics are also wide-ranging, and we talk about things that affect us here. And this evening, we have a special program for you. And we want to start out the discussion at this time, and just to let you know that our topic this evening is mental health. We are talking about mental health and how that affects the young among us. We know what has been happening over the past 2+ years. But since the start of the global pandemic, which has, it started in the latter half of 2019, many have looked, for ways to respond to this unexpected event. An event we have all come to know as the pandemic brought on by the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, which is still claiming lives across the world. And apart from millions of persons who have died during the past 2.5 years, for families, friends, and those who have passed, the mental trauma remains. And perhaps among the most impacted have been young persons. And if you look at some of the key facts compiled by the World Health Organization, the WHO, they tell us that, globally, 1 in 7, 10 to 19-year-olds experience a mental disorder, amounting to some 13% of the global burden of the disease in this age group. And also when we look at depression, it is also said that depression, anxiety, and behavioral disorders are among the leading causes of illness and disability among adolescents. And it is also said that suicide is the 4th leading cause of death among 15 to 29-year-olds. And if we look further, we also have seen that a UN statement, goes on to say that the consequences of failing to address adolescent mental health conditions extend to adulthood, impairing both physical and mental health and limiting opportunities to lead fulfilling lives as adults. So the information continues, and again, according to a UN report, it sees this period as a crucial time for developing social and emotional habits important for mental health and well-being. And these include adopting healthy sleep patterns, would you believe, exercising regularly, developing coping skills, problem solving, and interpersonal skills, among others. But we are here to talk about that very same thing that we just mentioned there, coping skills. There are many ways that people look at very creatively, I suppose, over the past 2 years plus, we have become very creative individuals. But we want to focus on how this business of mental health is impacting on young persons, and I suppose not just here in Trinidad and Tobago, but throughout the world. We are hearing about a special program that I understand, a special program that is being put on at this time, and it has to do with using art, that creative sector involvement, involving young persons within the community of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, I have someone here on the program who's going to chat with us a bit about that, and let me just bring her in on the program. No stranger to the Citizens Community Forum. She has been on, I believe we have spoken with her before in another, at another time. Qushiba Fleur, and we just want to welcome into the program. Ms. Fleur, good evening and welcome to the Citizens Community Forum.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Wonderful. You are here in the capacity of, I'd want to label you as community advocate, treating with this business of youngsters. I know that you have worked, for many, many years, dealing with young persons, and especially in the community, the disabled community. You obviously would have had some experiences, working with young persons, and we're here to talk about mental health. I understand that there is an there's a project that's involved, I'm seeing here where, an opportunity is being given for young people to get involved and to cope. Help with their coping skills. And seeing here the Pan American Health Organization, the World Health Organization, in partnership with the UNDP, UNICEF, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, and other stakeholders. Tell us about this project, Ms. Fleur.
It's a project that started in June of this year. The focus of the project was supporting youth in mental health by focusing on finding creative solutions for young people, by young people, to cope with mental health challenges. The program, the main objective of the project, it was to start that conversation, because we know mental health discussions are like taboo in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm thinking it's not just here, but in many other cultures and countries, mental health is seen as something negative, and the conversation is seen as something negative. So one of the objectives was to start that conversation with parents, with educators, with the children themselves, with family, with friends, and also to have young people express and expose them to different mediums, positive mediums of expressing themselves, their feelings and emotions through creative and performing and visual arts. So that's basically what the program is about. It ended though, it's ending now, with the opportunity for them to have the work that they would have put in the last few months displayed at 3 different outlets throughout Trinidad and Tobago.
Now, I'm seeing some dates here, and I suppose this program continues. The 3 dates that I'm seeing here: the 11th of October, the 29th of October, and the 12th of November. Those are some of the dates for which some things are happening, but more specifically, October 11th would have focused on the area of art and the creative sector.
Well, on yesterday, which was World Mental Health Day, we launched the opening of the art exhibition, because during the
on the 10th, that would be on the 10th. Yes, the 10th.
Yesterday, yeah. What had happened during the project? The young people that were a part of the project, they were selected from different parts of Trinidad and Tobago, and they were a part of the process was for them to do a piece. It was through creative or performing arts on how they felt during the pandemic. And a lot of them decided to do visual arts, they were painting. And the amount of creativity that went into it and what came out of it is fascinating. It blows your mind when you look at it. Some of them did poetry, some of them did spoken word. They were part of dancing, and then they did a theme song along with Nival Chatlal and Marge Blackman. So yesterday at the launch, we were able to see a lot of the art being displayed, and then we had the theme song, We Have Love, was also launched last night at the event, and the display starts today from the 11th, and it goes until the 21st of October at the Art Society of Trinidad and Tobago in Federation Park in Port of Spain. We moved after that to San Fernando, from the 29th to November 4th. So the 29th of October to November 4th, they moved the display to San Fernando in the City Hall, or San Fernando City Corporation. And then from the 12th of November to the 18th, we're in Tobago. But we are going to be there just for one day on the 12th of November. For persons who want to meet with the children and have a conversation with them about their pieces.
All right, so that we're looking at a couple of activities. But, how did this all come about? Now, I'm seeing where there are some very prominent partner, organizations, the Ministry of Health, UNDP, UNICEF. How did this all come about?
Well, I think it was, and I think from my understanding, it was through Ms. Dara Healy. She's from Right Connect. She's a communicator as well, and she's into the performing arts field as well.
Okay.
She had an idea of, um, to do something with young people around in this particular area of mental health, and she shared the what she was thinking and what she wanted to do with um, Faho, and they decided that they are going to definitely be a part of a project like this. And as the project went along, other stakeholders became involved. So it started off with one or two stakeholders, and then the others became involved once they understood the capacity of the project and what it was about. They all became involved. I became involved in the project because Ms. Dara would have requested persons or young people with disabilities as part of the process, and I was contacted for that purpose. And from me being contacted, we had four persons, young people with disabilities, as part of the project. Two are deaf, one has Down syndrome, and the other person is visually impaired. But the visually impaired young lady, she did not have the opportunity to end the program with us because she had some family challenges. But the two deaf youths and the child with the child with Down syndrome, they ended the program, and their artwork is up for display as well.
Okay.
As well.
All right. Because I was going to ask you, you know, how are we treating with not just, the abled, but the disabled, as well. And I know that you have a specialty in that particular area, dealing with the deaf, and so, and when we talk about coping skills, obviously, it's not just, those who we consider to be, normal, but also those, we have to consider those who are differently abled in that sense. And what have you been seeing in terms of getting the kinds of results? Because whatever we do as a community, as a program, as a project, there's always that bottom line. You want to be able to have met your objectives. What has been the results so far, from what you've seen and what has taken place?
From the project of itself, from my experience of being a part of the project, when we started off, I think we came in on the second week of the project. It was it was the first time the other participants who were hearing, don't have disabilities, so the non-disabled participants, if I'm allowed to say that, they it was the first time they were communicating with persons with disabilities in general. So it was a first time experience, but they were welcoming and they were open to learning. Even the adults who were part of the project, Ms. Dara and her Right Connect team, they all were open to understanding, okay, how are we going to communicate with them? What are we supposed to do? Is there anything special that we're supposed to provide? And as the project went along, week after week, it just everybody integrated well with one another, where the youth with disabilities became a key part of the process. Tristan in particular, he has Down syndrome, but Tristan is like the life of any
One of the
anything.
participants,
Yeah,
yes.
he's one of the participants with disabilities, and he was like the light of the event. So I remember Miss Dara saying one afternoon, I mean, if Tristan missed a session, Qushiba, So it was like Tristan had this, and he does have that kind of personality where he brings this energy with him that is so positive. But when the young people started painting, it was something because they had the representatives from the Art Society of Trinidad and Tobago volunteering as part of the project. And when they started coming in and explaining, okay, this is what we would like you guys to do, all the paintings started off dark. A lot of the paintings started off dark. And from the guidance of the members of the Art Society, we saw the switch in the artwork, and there was a difference in, yes, this is how I feel, or this is how I felt, but this is where I'm at now. So you saw the change in a lot of the paintings where it started off with a dark background, or it was blue, or whatever the dark colors were. But then there was all this brightness, and some of them I didn't even pay attention to until last night at the launch, which was really amazing artwork. One of the youth in particular, his name is Tommy, he was telling me last night that he wants to pursue art as something, that he wants to do as a career, because this has opened him up in finding himself and understanding who he is as a person. And that is very deep. And another one of the young lady who presented last night as well, while I spoke to her, she was, I was we were listening to her talking and we were saying, you know, she has great potential. And she said, I want to be in leadership. I want, you know, and the program opened them up to understanding themselves, as Tommy said, better, and understanding that it's okay to not be okay sometimes. And they recognize that. And I think it helps them, and it would help their friends and any other youths who are part, you know, who would see the project and understand what the process was about.
All right, so we're talking about coping with mental health, and the focus here is on youth. And we just want to remind our listeners and our viewers that this is the Citizens Community Forum. I'm speaking with Ms. Qushiba Fleur, and as I said, I have labeled her as a community advocate, in support of young people within the communities, different communities in Trinidad and Tobago, with a special focus on the disabled community as well, because I'm familiar with some of the work that she has done, for over the many years. So our topic, we're dealing with mental health among young persons. For Trinidad and Tobago at this time, Ms. LaFleur, we have seen where we have just, not out of the pandemic just as yet. I think we may have eased ourselves somewhat out of the acute stage, but certainly, we don't seem to have a full, picture of where this the pandemic is going just yet, but we may have little indicators that we may get out of it eventually. But certainly, while that is happening, while a lot of us may be waiting, there obviously needs to be the kinds of programs that you're talking about. I'm wondering if just apart from art and using the creative sector, if there's any other area or areas you believe can also contribute towards young people coping with the mental traumas that they have faced and continue to face.
I believe talking helps. With young people, I think sometimes as adults we do not listen to young people because we have this mentality that they're young people and they don't have any problems. It's like, what are you worrying about? You don't have no bills to pay, you don't have no children to take care of, you don't have any problems. But the reality is youths do have their own challenges. Just this afternoon, I was having a conversation with my son who doesn't have a disability or anything, and he's 21. And like, why are you behaving like this? And mommy, I stressed out. Just to have that conversation with him about why. And it's a lot of times we take it for granted that when a young person said they're stressed out or something is bugging them, we don't really pay attention to those things. So I believe besides using, because creative and performing arts is something that has worked and has proven to work throughout the years when it comes to mental health, dance, doing therapy through music, therapy to just meditation. All these things really work throughout the years. Drawing, painting, having just a group of people to sit down and have a support network with. Those things have helped in therapy throughout the years, and I think those things would help young people as well. So even having peer groups for them to just talk about how they feel and share what they're experiencing at the time, I think those things would help. Once we have adults in the room or in the space that understand that we are allowing them to share, and we are not having any, because sometimes as adults we go all up in our feelings, I like to say, and we just focus on how we feel about what somebody is saying, but we don't pay attention to how that person may be feeling about what is being said because of their experiences. And it's important for us to understand that youths have their own experiences too. And they look at us as the adults to support them and to be that person to guide them through when they're having a challenging time. And if we are not there to support them or guide them through, then who will do it for them? So I think talking along with the other mediums will also assist young people with their challenges.
All right. Now, specifically, when we look at the different communities, of course, you have people who are at different levels in terms of economic standing. There are people who may not be as fortunate as others, so that you have that different sort of structural those different structures within different communities. And I'm wondering how much of a challenge that can be when you have to treat with people who have different concerns and levels of trauma, because I mean someone may have an issue of you may have an anxiety or disorder. You may have someone who may have another type of maybe suffering from depression. So that there's a whole complex, it's really a complex issue. And I'm wondering, how, if you are hopeful that programs such as this can really make that dent in towards coping and bringing the kinds of results, because it's, as I said, it's a very complex issue.
I think with mental health in particular, there are variations in mental health. And I think one of the
And
things,
that's the point I was making, yes.
yeah, we have to be able to sensitize people in understanding that too, because when you hear mental health, I think people start thinking of, I might go mad or I'm a mad person, and that's the kind of negative connotation you get from it. But that is not what mental health really is. And the challenges some people encounter, it doesn't have to mean those kind of things. And I think it's important for people to understand that. One of the things I believe in strongly, Stephen, is therapy. Because I have had my own personal challenges as an individual, and counseling and therapy worked. So I strongly believe in that as well. And sometimes there may be the persons who may not be able to talk out how they feel, but talking to somebody who understands and can ask the right questions, could guide you in the right direction. They help bring out things in you that you wouldn't even think existed inside of you. So I believe those things work as well. But I think the conversation needs to start in sensitizing not just the youth, but the general population on what mental health really is and the dynamics and variation of it. And then we start explaining what some of the, these are some of the things that may come up. And this is how you cope or deal with this particular aspect. But there are many ways of coping with challenges that you may be having as a person mentally.
Yes.
There are a number of ways you can.
All right. And what we want to do is take a short break now. And when we come back, we will continue that discussion. I'm Stephen Cummings. We're talking mental health on the Citizens Community Forum. I have with me Ms. Qushiba Fleur. And as I said, she is a community advocate, dealing with, dealt with so many different, issues within the national community, inclusive of the deaf community in Trinidad and Tobago. So what we'll do, we'll take a short break and we come right back. The University of the West Indies has the capacity to generate its own funding, or at least part funding. Is that what I'm getting from you?
Yes, Stephen, thank you very kindly. You have put it in a precise language. If they have been doing that, it is to a minuscule extent.
Somebody tried to ask me, so what do you want? I said, brother, let me do good. Sometimes, even as a person, you're not sure what you want, but you're absolutely sure what you don't want. And workers are absolutely certain that this 2% that is on offer is an insult.
2% over an 8-year period and tell your boy, oh God, cool it, things are hard. No. Are we living in a different Trinidad and Tobago? And that is what we have to discuss.
Discussion on health, leadership, governance, crime, education, and social justice. Every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m., the Citizens Community Forum. Your host, Stephen Cummings. And welcome back to the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings. This evening we are talking mental health with focus on the young persons among us within our communities, within our society, Trinidad and Tobago, of course. And we are understanding that there is a special program that is on using art, focusing on the creative sector as an element of, a way to cope, with all the mental stresses and, the trauma young persons, are facing today. Of course, we've seen the evidence, we've just looked at this report here from the United Nations, the UN, and even the World Bank. When you look at those international reports and those statistics, they tell a very grim story as to how this pandemic has impacted young persons, and we're talking about things such as behavioral disorders, eating disorders, psychosis, even suicide and self-harm, all come into picture. So we have to, I suppose, do whatever we can in terms of using whatever means. Be talking art and what has been happening, and the involvement of some of our young persons here. And we have Ms. Qushiba Fleur on the program. Ms. Fleur, welcome back to the program.
Yeah, I'm here, so thank you.
So we were talking when we went to the break there, and we were talking about some of those critical areas that we have to to pay attention to. But do you believe that what we are faced now, and especially among our young within the communities, is that do you believe that we really need to push that envelope even further, and target, for example, our policymakers, because when we talk about improving and the lives of persons, especially young persons, and we talk about mental health, do you believe that or would you like to see more being done from the policy level?
I think yes, because I think it's important, especially when it comes to health. I know a lot of money is invested in health on a yearly basis and budget, but we don't really, it's not like mental health has its own particular funding or capacity for that. And I think it's important because therapy is quite expensive, realistically, and therapists are expensive to pay. Last night I was hearing that at the St. Anne's Hospital there's a dance therapist and I think a music therapist now volunteering, an assistant at the hospital with patients there. And I think that's amazing because music therapy and dance therapy is very expensive. So it's something that once it's enshrined in policies, it would be, we have to get it done. So I think it's something that we should include and incorporate in part of, whatever policy making that is happening, especially when it comes to the health sector.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because this obviously falls into the area of the social sector, and I know that if you look at this year's budget, the fiscal package for 2023, it talks about that move towards, there is an intent. I mean, when you look at the document, there is an intent towards further addressing some of the very same issues that you made mention of. And as we are on that point, I think I did see a report that came out from the Ministry of Social Development, where it talked about sign language, for example, being in schools. As while we are talking about coping skills and using the creative sector, I believe that and in pushing the envelope, we obviously have to go beyond that.
I think you could explain more for me so I could understand better.
Yes, there was a report that came out from the Ministry of Social Development indicating that they were moving into wanted to move more into the mainstream of teaching sign language. I did see that in a report, and I'm saying that all again tied in to those coping skills, because I mean, if you are unable as somebody who maybe has a child who's unable to understand and to use the language that can impact on someone even being able to cope during this time.
But a lot of the times we see things and this is me being an advocate now, we see a lot of things being in reports and those things, but it's never really implemented. Although I know the report exists, and I heard not even just the social development, I heard education talking about it as well. It's not something that I'm going to be really about unless
you're not that hopeful. Yeah.
It's not that I'm not hopeful, but I'm not going to get excited about it unless it starts happening. Because even when things start happening as well, there's a monopolizing that happens in the system, and we start doing something and then it breaks down because of there's too much bureaucracy and too much things that happen when I don't even want to go down that road at the moment, but it's a good intent. And it's something that when I heard it the first time, I was really happy for, because like you are saying, if we have our children in schools, primary, secondary schools, even at the university level. And we still have to be fighting to explain to Ministry of Education the importance of having sign language interpreters working with them. We have to be fighting to get an understanding of, you can't just send a teacher's aide or a student aide to support a deaf child in a school. They need somebody who's skilled in interpreting, not just somebody who learns sign language 2 or 3, to a course 1 or a course 2, and you think it's okay to send that person to help a deaf child in a school accept information or access information, then we have a challenge. So it starts with not just providing the learning teaching of sign language in schools as well, but we also have to understand the importance of additional support, as you were saying, for the children in school, because that is very, very frustrating. When my son was doing CXC, who is deaf, I thought my child was going to go crazy because he was very adamant and he has to pass math and I have to pass English. And he's not a late sleeper. So, and up to this day, he don't really sleep late unless he's hanging out.
Okay.
He goes to bed early, and it caused a challenge with him, and I was really, really concerned. So there's a huge importance for us to be able to provide the necessary resource and support, not just for deaf children, but for children with disabilities on a whole in school, because that could eliminate a lot of stresses. The parents of children with disabilities and the child themselves when it comes to our education system.
All right. So I thought it was important, for us to just touch a bit on the disabled community, and even some of the coping skills, that we can cite as well. But I want to sort of get back to, the core part of our discussion as well, dealing with this adolescent mental health project. And I'm seeing where there are a couple of things, which you can also share again. You may have made mention of it, but just to go over those points again. Who is spearheading this project?
The Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, the WHO, in partnership with UNDP, UNICEF, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, and a number of other stakeholders that came on board as the project progressed.
Right, and we're looking at those dates again. Well, the 11th was, also, that particular day. We also have two other venues as well.
Yeah, so from the 29th of November to the, October to the 4th of November, the display moves to, or travels, I should say, to San Fernando Corporation, which is City Hall in San Fernando.
Okay.
And from November 12th to the 18th, we are at Nallis Library in Tobago.
All right, and we're using art and the creatives to as a coping tool among young persons. And yes, and again, the project, I understand, they're telling us based on some information that was passed to me as well. They're looking at helping to reduce mental health, that stigma, and encourage healthy conversation among young persons. Just going through some of the objectives here. Also, we're told to encourage young persons to be better at it, to be more creative, I suppose more passionate about, things that they can do, and also, to create that artistic pieces, which can be displayed in a final exhibition. Tell us about that final.
So this is what the final exhibition is. At the moment, the final exhibition is the displays that are happening throughout Trinidad and Tobago. So this is what the exhibition is all about.
All right. And again, of course, as to who are involved, obviously young persons across Trinidad and Tobago,
including children with disability, youth with disabilities. We have to incorporate that.
Right.
Because many times youth with disabilities or children with disabilities are left out of a lot of programs and projects, but this one in particular included them, and that's a big thing.
All right. Again, very, very important. So apart from this, you do have some well-known, partners, I suppose, when we talk about the UN and the Ministry of Education, what have you. But what about corporate Trinidad and Tobago? What has been the support been like? We have, companies that have a specific, portfolios in terms of their corporate social responsibility. What kinds of efforts have you been sensing coming from corporate Trinidad and Tobago?
To be honest, it's something I can ask the team, Ms. Sarah, and I know a lot of NGOs would have been coming out to support, and then hand, like the Art Society, they were not a part of the project initially, but they decided they're going to volunteer. And they were there with us almost every week to have the children through the process. And there were other organizations and persons that assisted. I'm not too sure they receive a lot of support from corporate, but I can ask. Yeah, that's something I would definitely ask.
All right. And again, it is said that, you know, when we look at it in this this period, you know, the mental trauma and what have you, you know, they talk about early detection and treatment. They talk about, you know, the response mechanism, you know, what do we do? But obviously this is a whole of society approach, not just necessarily one group or one grouping, you know, a group of persons within the society.
Yeah, I think what happens next with the project, a committee was formed with parents, key stakeholders from various ministries, NGOs, and other organizations to continue what was started here, as you know, so that it would not just stop with a project happened and everything just shut down. It has to continue. So there were some parents. I'm included in one of the parents, as well as the NGOs who are involved in the project moving forward. And we have some particular responsibilities. I can't talk about those at the moment, but we do have some particular responsibilities that we will have to take up, and as we move forward. So we're supposed to have meeting very soon and all that to start pushing the mandate forward, and you know, the importance of mental health, and especially young people when it comes to mental health, and like helping them through the process.
All right, because I was about to ask you, you know, what's next, you know, for this, if there is a continuum, and what form, you know, what does that look like?
Yeah, well, like I said, there are two committees formed. We're now going to come into one group, and we're supposed to start having discussions very soon. The good thing about the committees is like action people, they're doers. So I'm excited to see what happens next myself, because you know, normally we just sit and talk and nothing happens, but this bunch seems very interested and excited to just get this done. And I'm excited for that as well. So I'm really looking forward to the continuation of this and to continue working with the young people. I think young people help keep me young. I think one thing I was going to ask you though, you know, when we were talking about the creative arts part of it, I mean, I don't know if people actually do dance, like not in a party, but just get up and dance in front of the mirror, listen to music, and just you know, like,
is that as a coping mechanism?
Well,
are you
I think it helps you cope with a lot of different things that you may not be aware of, because just freeing yourself up and just dancing, just for no particular reason, you're just listening to music and having fun. Your mind just feel a whole lot different, and you feel better. And based on the kind of music you listen to and all that, it helps make you feel better. So I think a lot more people need to not just paint and draw, but dance as well, because dancing helps.
All right, all part of the creative and you know.
Yeah, creative and performing arts is fun.
All right. Well, Ms. Fleur, we are almost out of time, and it's a pleasure talking with you on this very interesting and this very important process dealing with adolescent and mental health. This project, we're looking at ways we all can support. This obviously is, as you said, something that that will be continuing, and we are happy to hear about that. But before we end the program, we just wanted, if you can share with us in the closing moments, there might be a message that you'd want to leave with us, leave with Trinidad and Tobago, and especially directed to young persons within our communities.
I think one of the key things for young people to know is okay not to be okay. I think that's a key thing for anybody to understand, because of some people just walk around thinking I have to be fine all the time, and that's not the truth. The strongest person sometimes needs strength themselves to help them go through, and we're all not strong all the time. That's a myth. We all need help, we all need support. So it's okay not to be okay sometimes, and I think that's the only message I want to send.
All right, it's okay not to be okay. All right, this is the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings. I'm talking with Ms. Qushiba Fleur, and as I said, community advocate, supporting communities and young persons throughout Trinidad and Tobago, the disabled community. This time around, her focus is dealing with, adolescent mental health. There's a project that she has, and using art and the creatives as a coping mechanism through this period for which we all going through. As I said, 2 years plus, going back to 2019, the latter half of 2019, when the pandemic struck, and it's still with us. Maybe not, in the acute stage, but of course, we all have to do our best. And we want to thank Ms. Fleur for coming on to the program and talking with us. Thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Stephen Cummings. This is the Citizens Community Forum. Of course, we will be back with you and talk, some more. There's always something interesting within Trinidad and Tobago, within our communities, within the national sphere that is always of interest to us. So until the next program, see you next Wednesday. It was a famous poet who once said, "They came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Words there from famous poet Martin Niemöller, 1892 to 1984.